Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com. It's time for Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott, episode 74 for September 13th, 2008. Mustard with Whine. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Audible.com. For your free audiobook and a whole lot more, visit audible.com/windows. And by Visa. With every purchase, Visa prevents, detects, and resolves online fraud. Safe, secure, Visa. It's time for Windows Weekly, episode 74 in your playbook. Just turn to page 34 of your hymnal and sing along with Paul Thurrott as he sings the praises and sometimes the flaws of Windows, Microsoft, Zune,
stuff,
Mesh. Hey, Paul Thurrott.
Hey, Leo Laporte.
Hey, we were at a meeting yesterday talking about open microblogging, Twitter only open, and Microsoft sent somebody from the Mesh team there. It was kind of cool.
From the Mesh team?
Yeah, talking about what Mesh is up to. Yeah.
Okay, what'd they say?
They implied, well, one of the things they said, which is kind of funny, is, don't bother, we'll take care of it from here.
Yeah, we'll handle that. That's what they said to Netscape, too, by the way.
We'll handle it from here. Well, and that is a little bit of a threat to people like Twitter, don't you think? Because...
Yes.
Here's
what I'd say to that.
The big monkey could come in the door, and it's all over.
I want to touch on this a little bit today because one of the big questions I've been getting lately is, there's Mesh, right, which is not even in beta. And I think it's important to note this. I had some problems, some replication issues recently with Mesh, and as somebody pointed out, this is a technical preview. It's not even a beta.
Wow.
So it's pre-beta,
right.
Sort of and I would say that the folder sharing, the data sharing functionality that's available in Mesh is almost like a proof of concept. We're going to scale this thing out and see how it goes. And it's been successful for that. But, Windows Live has various services that one could say duplicate some of the functionality in Mesh. And I asked them about that. And the general feeling about Mesh is Mesh will eventually be the platform on which all these other things run.
Right.
Today they're kind of out there on their own. And Microsoft has a very high-level ideal that they're going to combine services from other companies, not just their own services, but create a sort of a platform on the web where everything will interoperate very happily together. So I think that's what they were talking about. Not so much that they necessarily plan to have a Twitter-type service, although, by the way, I think they, in fact, do plan that. And if you look at Mesh today, there's something in Mesh called News,
right,
which is really underutilized. But if you look at what that is, it does seem a bit like Twitter, does it? Does it not? If you pay attention to that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think that's where they're going with that.
Well, it's not like, Facebook kind of had status updates long before Twitter was doing anything. So this stuff, it just kind of makes sense if you're building a networked operating system.
Facebook is a lot like Twitter to me in the sense that it was something I sort of knew was out there, didn't know anything about, and all of a sudden it's in my face every single day.
Yeah.
It really is interesting how quickly both of those things snowballed.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, Facebook is classic because of course I hate people and I hate to discuss things with anybody, but one of the things that's really interesting about Facebook is I'm hearing from long lost people from my past,
right.
People from high school and even earlier.
Right.
I'm hearing from family members that I don't get to talk to very often. Like my mother. No, I'm not. No, I mean, people further out, on the family chain there. But it's really interesting how this has brought a lot of people together.
Yes.
And, this is something I might have otherwise just sort of ignored because, let's face it, I'm not exactly a young guy moving up in the world. And I'm really just kind of clinging on to the hope that I could,
you could have some friends. They actually could have some.
Yeah. I'm not trying to make new friends. Right. Exactly. But here they are. Here's all these people. And it is kind of amazing.
It's a brave new world. And what's interesting is to me, especially on this show, is to watch old companies like Microsoft adjust to the new world and see how they can fit in. You were there. Sure. You were at Microsoft last week.
Oh, we have a lot to discuss.
Oh, yeah?
We have a lot I can't discuss as well,
yeah?
Unfortunately.
So was it just briefings, or what were you doing?
Yeah, a little of everything, right? So I hadn't been out in a while. I used to, I think we discussed this previously, I used to go out there a lot, 5-6 times a year. And this is actually the first time all year I had been to their campus, and you can sort of talk about the whys of that. And I worked on a book, and that cut into the amount of time I had to travel this year. But a lot of it from a sort of an official relationship standpoint, I would say, Microsoft groups come to my home fairly regularly. And also we have live meetings. We can do these virtual meetings, and that's less expensive for everybody. But obviously it's nice to get there in person sometimes. And I have a lot of friends there. So it's a nice opportunity to catch up with some of those people and also meet in person with some of the groups there. And obviously there's some big events coming down the road, PDC and so forth. So a lot of the teams there, like Mesh, are gearing up for that, the Windows team and so forth. And there's some discussions around.
Yeah, Angus said he was rushing back because he had to get ready for PDC.
Yeah. Well, by the way, from a PDC standpoint, I would say this: the most interesting thing I heard about the PDC, which is that big developer show they're having in Los Angeles at the end of October. Microsoft does not have PDCs every year. They have them every so often when there's a big platform shift occurring. And historically, those have been around versions of Windows. So there were actually 2 PDCs leading up to Windows Vista. And then previous to that, they did one, for Windows XP. They did one before that for Windows 2000, whatever, looking back. This PDC obviously will be the coming out party for Windows 7. But actually, the big push at the PDC this year is going to be Live Mesh, not Windows.
That's a platform, though, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I was really interested to see that. In fact, for the Windows 7 guys, it's kind of interesting because they have 2 shows. There's the hardware conference, the Windows Hardware Engineering Conference, WinHack, which occurs right after PDC this year. In fact, literally right after in LA as well at the same conference center. They're trying to figure out, what details do we divulge here? Which do we do here? They're going to have some information at both, but they're not really the big news, although I think they will be from a news standpoint. I think a lot of people want to know about Windows 7, and there'll be a lot of excitement there. But honestly, from Microsoft's perspective, from a sheer volume of information, a lot more about Mesh is going to be occurring at PDC this year than about Windows. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I think, I'm not making plans for Microsoft, but it does seem as if Mesh is the future. You could. Are you going to go to PDC? I haven't been invited, but maybe I should. Sounds like it'd be an interesting event. So it's open to everybody, not just developers. Developers in the press. Developers in the press. Yeah.
They're actually being very stingy with invites, I've heard. So we should talk about trying to get you in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind going. How many days is it?
It's probably the better part of a week, but you can probably get away with 2-3 days.
Wow. But they'll talk about Windows 7.
Of course.
Did you talk about Windows 7 with them?
A little bit. Carefully.
You can't talk about it, can you?
I did. Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to. If you had talked about them, you would be unable to talk about it.
Yeah. So what I can say is there have been stories printed recently about, let's say such things as Windows 7 being stripped down in the sense of, a lot of the bundled applications we've come to expect from Windows maybe won't be included. You may have seen rumors of a pre-beta version of the operating system being given out for the first time at the PDC to attendees.
But these are all rumors, and you can't confirm.
I'm just saying you may have seen something to that effect. I can neither
confirm nor deny
that those are. Yeah.
Okay. But we'll find out soon enough. End of October, maybe, perhaps they'll say more about all.
Yeah,
this.
And I think actually there'll be some interesting news along these lines, even before the end of this month. So, and I know Microsoft. I can say because they didn't tell me this, but I heard it elsewhere that they are now beta testing for the first time, sort of a pre-beta release. Maybe something that might be going out at the PDC.
Wow, they're farther along than I would have thought. I mean.
Yeah,
I guess it's been a year and a half since Vista came out. I guess that makes sense.
Well, the other conversation I think I can sort of allude to, and the guy who told me this will appreciate it because I know he told me he listens to the podcast, which was actually a very sobering thing I heard from a number of people.
We're listening, Paul.
Yeah, and it gave me pause every time. Someone, the sheer number of people who said, during this week. I listened to your podcast.
Ooh, that's scary.
Or follow you on Twitter too was the other big one.
Yeah.
Made me each time skip a heartbeat for a second and think back, did I do anything stupid that I should be ashamed of? Kind of thing. But anyway, he mentioned that if you think back to Vista Beta 1, which, man, I can't even remember when that came out. I want to say it was July 2005, somewhere.
Yeah.
Possible. That was really immature from a functional standpoint, from a look and feel standpoint. It was really not very together. What I've been told is that whatever release happens, people are going to be shocked by how good it is. Yeah. That it's really surprisingly, usable and workable. And I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised. Now, especially if they have any experience with Windows.
As soon as they brief you and NDA you, they kind of put you in handcuffs because now you can't really speculate at all on what Windows 7 might be or look like.
Right. I didn't get to see anything as far as look and feel goes, so we can speculate away there. I mean, we know, for example, that the folks who are responsible. By the way, one thing that was funny is I did meet with the Windows guy, the Windows client guys. They wouldn't let me in they're in building 37 now, and which is a brand new building on campus. In fact, it's the building they were building when I almost got killed by a tree there during that storm last year, and that's where that is. But anyway, they wouldn't let me near this place, and I think it was because there's all this stuff up. You know, they were afraid I'd walk by something and see something.
Right.
You know.
Right. Are they? I don't know. Again, you just have to say if you can or cannot talk about this. The code base is still the NT kernel, still Vista.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's something I would like to talk about. So this is really interesting to me. And again, this is something I'd have to go back and look to figure out where I wrote this. But if you think back to previous versions of Windows, let's just say NT versions of Windows, NT-based versions of Windows. So NT4 moving forward. You know, the plan all along was that they would use the exact same code base, and they would kind of, they would halt it one day and say, okay, this is Windows, whatever.
Right.
You know, they'd halt it the next day, you know. But the way things have progressed, and this is basically started with Windows Vista Service Pack 1 and Windows Server 2008, which are both based on exactly the same code base. They don't fork the development tree anymore like they used to. So, for example, there's this sort of common code base running down the middle, and every once in a while, someone would come along and say, okay, it's time to work on Service Pack 1, or it's time to work on the next version of Windows. And they would fork it right there, and they would have these two code bases that they would have, or three, you know, depending on what was going on, that they would have to maintain separately. And as they made changes to these forks, they would have to push them back into the main code base at the end. And then when the thing was RTM'd, or when this product was finalized, they would merge everything back into that main code base. Well, that's not how it works anymore. Because Windows is completely componentized, they can at any time just sort of make a hard stop and say, okay, we're going to build a version of Windows, whatever. It doesn't matter what it's called. It doesn't matter if it's client or server or home server or whatever it is. It's that version of Windows is not based on anything. It is literally Windows as it is built today, but whatever specific components they need to build that thing, whatever it may be. So there's no more forking going on. There's just one code base, right? So what do I mean by that? So someday in the future, there'll be a Windows 7, there'll be a Windows Server 7, there'll be a Windows Home Server, whatever they call that. These things will all be based on the exact same code. It's just that each of them will take only the parts they need to build the product.
Huh.
Right?
Huh.
Yeah, it really
is. That a more reliable way to do it? I guess componentizing is always more reliable because you don't have.
Well, yeah, because the problem back in the day, as we say, back in the Vista days or XP days, was you had these sort of messy forks on the tree where you'd have to then get all that code back into the main branch, and integrating that stuff back was always a disaster.
Yeah.
And I think what they do now is much cleaner and more elegant, from a technical perspective, but it's also more efficient. And that's really interesting to me. So there's sort of a cleaner, more componentized way of building Windows. And they talked up the componentization in Vista, which is what enables them to make all those different product versions, right?
Right.
That's true of Server as well. But what's interesting is, the components go well beyond what you see in Vista. There's components in there for all that server stuff as well. You just don't see it in Vista because they don't pull that stuff out to make Vista. They only pull out the stuff they need for that client version of the operating system. So it's all the same code.
This sounds like the right way to do it. I mean, you imagine that this is a hideously complex proposition to write something like this size, maintain it, change the engine while the airplane's in flight. I mean, this stuff is tough.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I guess I would just point out, some of the things that it doesn't include are support for such things as really small mobile devices like phones. There isn't some sort of, and there should be, I think, but right now Windows Mobile is separate. So in today's world, Windows Mobile is kind of off on its own. It's a completely different animal. But if you want to make a comparison to, say, Apple and Mac OS X, you could argue that, Apple has this mobile version for the phone, and they have a desktop version, a server version. Mm-hmm. Maybe Microsoft will get to that at some point. And then I suppose you could also look at these lightweight, low power, low performance mobile devices where they have to go back to XP because, the starting point for the mainstream versions of Windows today, Vista with Service Pack 1, et cetera, are still too big, and too resource intensive to support these devices. So I think this is something obviously going forward. We'll see. I mean, I know that Windows 7. Actually, I can't say that. So
I love this.
We'll see
this is, by the way, why I never sign NDAs or do embargoes or anything, because I don't want to know what I don't know, what I can't say, what I can say, and
sure,
it's too hard for me. I have a small brain,
so we should move along.
Hypervisor, Hyper-V coming out Monday. Yes,
they announced it last Monday. So
okay.
It's coming out within 30 days.
So announced last Monday, out soon.
So to understand what this is there's a feature of Windows Server 2008 called Windows Server 2008 Hyper-V. It's the hypervisor virtualization environment, but they're also shipping a free hypervisor that you can install on bare metal.
Oh, that's cool.
Without Windows
does that put VMware and out of business?
Puts them on notice, I would say.
Holy cow.
But VMware they have a free product as well. But honestly, what this is for is they know that there are shops, IT shops, big companies where, they're not ready to move to Windows Server 2008, or they have certain installs where they're still running on Windows 2000, they're still running on Windows Server 2003. Maybe they're running on SUSE Linux, enterprise server. For those places that don't need Windows Server 2008, they can use this version of Hyper-V to get those capabilities. There's some limitations around failover and cluster support. They can only have so much RAM and so forth. They're not quite as full-featured as the full, Windows Server 2008 version, but, free. And if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think this violates any NDAs, maybe a glimpse at what we might expect moving forward for virtualization in Windows in general.
Interesting.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. That's the future, isn't it?
I think so.
Hyper-V. And since it's been to the hardware, now I remember maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was on Security Now. I'm trying to remember. Mm-hmm. Talked a little bit about security issues with Hyper-V. And remember the blue pill and the red pill? Yeah. I wonder if those are still there in store, or have they gone away? The issue was, hey, it's really secure, and then a researcher came up with the way.
Well, it is really secure. It is certainly more secure. I think when you look at Windows, any version of Windows, you have Windows Server 2008. Base install, it has a certain, what Microsoft calls an attack surface, which I think is a great phrase. And obviously they designed this thing to be as locked down as possible. The more you build on top of that, the more roles and services and features that you add to the operating system, the bigger the attack surface becomes, right? You add a web server, you turn on all these services for the web server. Well, suddenly you have all these other ways that people can attack that server, right? Now, they've created something called Server Core, which is a more stripped down version of the server. It has basically no GUI, and it has support for a limited number of roles and services and features. This thing has a smaller attack surface. Hyper-V, which when you boot it up, it's classic. It comes up in a command line environment that looks like Server Core. It basically has 5 or 6 options. I'm trying desperately to get a screenshot of this, but it basically says, tell us the domain you want to be part of, give us the date and the time, and that's about it. There's not much else going on. You have to administer this thing remotely, and that includes such things as installing, say, guest OSs, in the child partitions on virtualization. And that's about all it does. There isn't much going on there, and there's no real. It has to be run on a PC or a server that has certain chipset features that, in a hardware sense, prevent, the memory from overwriting each other. There's no way to get from one environment to the other. They literally are discrete and separate, if not physically, then basically physically, because they are on the same hardware, but they're designed to be run separately. So of the versions of Windows Server 2008, arguably Hyper-V is in fact the safest version with the smallest attack surface, I would imagine. This version doesn't even have Windows on it.
Right. Right. That's pretty safe.
It's the safest version of Windows. There's no Windows.
Right. There's no. That's one way to do it.
What else do you want? I mean, it doesn't do anything, but it's sort of, if you're looking for security, I mean, that may be it.
They gave you a tour of the Microsoft Home.
Yeah.
What's
I got to put shots.
Is this they had this house that landed like the Wizard of Oz in the parking lot at Comdex one year?
No.
Is it that?
No.
Okay.
I do remember.
Remember that? Yeah.
No, this has been around for a lot longer, and they refresh it, I want to say, every 2 to 3 years. But what it basically is it's a home in the executive briefing center that consists of homes like you would have. Of rooms like you would have in a house. There's an entryway, there's a dining room, a kid's bedroom, a living room, kitchen, etc. And it has all this technology in it that Microsoft feels will be mainstream consumer tech 10 years down the road. And so years ago, I mean, the very first time I went there, what they were showing off were basically prototype versions of things that were, became like media center, and they don't necessarily look at it like this is stuff we're going to productize, but obviously the various product teams of Microsoft go on these regular tours of this, and the guys in different areas will look at something and say, oh, this is interesting, because it's basically like a Microsoft research type thing. And some of the stuff is really cool. And there's a lot of RFID tag stuff where, you pull food in and out of the refrigerator and, it knows when you need more milk, that kind of stuff.
Right.
There's a demo that's sort of like a greatest hits Microsoft Home thing they've had for years, but I still think it's beautiful, where you put two things down on the counter and you say, all right, this is some of the stuff I have to work with. Give me some recipes. And this, laser thing shows up on the counter and says, okay, you can make brownies, you can make cake, you can make, whatever. Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, it's
Epcot
some cool stuff
for Microsoft.
It is, except that unlike Epcot, it didn't freeze in time.
Right. They keep it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put some I have an amazing number of photos from that.
Oh, good.
Write something around it as well, but I'll put this next couple of days. It's just so big. I've been trying to get stuff up as efficiently as possible, and this is the least efficient of the things that I saw because it's just so much. But it's really neat stuff, and it's easier to look at than it is to describe. So I guess I would just say, for a lot of it, wait on the article and the photos. But I got to figure out how I'm going to even present it. There's just so much stuff there.
Right.
But it's a cool thing, and it's not hokey at all. It's all very believable. It's very cool, and they have these prototype Windows mobile phones that are gorgeous, and they're sort of presence aware. They know where you are and what your capabilities are depending on where you are, that kind of thing. So if you're the homeowner, you can use the phone to control like the lights and the TV and your schedule and all that stuff. But if you're just visiting, it gives you much less information and much less control over whatever may be in the house, or much less interactivity and so forth. So a lot of good stuff.
That sounds like something I'd like to see. It sounds like an amusement park ride.
Yes.
I would like to see that. I could enjoy that. Is there a Zune in there? Is there a Zune in the home of the future?
No, because this is stuff that will exist in 5 to 10 years. No. So I kid you.
Zune 3 came out. I'm very pleased for one thing. It has Audible support now.
Yeah, finally.
Hallelujah.
I asked him about that, and I have to say, this was said with a straight face, and I didn't necessarily appreciate the way this was presented, but I said, seriously, what was the holdup on this? The guy said, it just isn't a
priority.
Wasn't a priority of our core demographic.
Well, they're aimed at 14-year-olds, obviously.
Yeah, he said 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yeah. Well, that's probably true. They don't read, I guess. It is an older thing, but I tell you it's self-fulfilling, isn't it? I mean, if you don't put that kind of stuff in, then that's who you're going to get. People who don't.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about the Audible support is, you may recall when they started Zune, the idea was we're not going to work with everybody else anymore. We're going to do our own thing.
Right. And
the notion was, you can't take a Zune and manage it with Windows Media Player. You have to use the Zune software. You can't take a Zune and buy songs from iTunes. You have to buy them from Zune Marketplace, that kind of thing. And Audible support, and they're also supporting something called Overdrive, which you may be familiar with. I had never heard of it, but it's another service of sorts. I guess they supply audiobooks to libraries and to Borders.com and some other places. It's a different book service. Again, I'm not there, but these things will not be integrated into Zune Marketplace. You won't see them in the software on the PC. You'll only see an audiobook entry on the Zune if you install an audiobook on the Zune. And the only way you can do it is through Audible's site in Audible's case. And they call that side loading. And you've seen, you and I both have used Audible's downloader and the software there, and you know that it can do this. So if you have basically any device on Earth, it will just automatically push it over to that thing.
Right.
But it literally bypasses the software. So it just does it directly to the device. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Huh. So this is their first little, well, maybe we're not so serious about doing everything ourselves. You can't.
I mean, you're in an ecosystem now, and I think that's pretty clear. You'd like to, sure. But, that's kind of the natural thing a developer's going to say is, well, we know how to do it better than anybody else, so we'll do it ourselves. But you got to include the outside world. It has to be part of the otherwise.
I got the feeling. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just customers demand it.
Right. But that's the thing. I got this vibe like they're checking off a box. Like, okay, now we can get that out of the way.
Right. Right. Hey, we're going to talk about the Surface in just a second. I gather you had a chance to play with it. That's pretty cool.
I did.
Before we do, let's mention our good friends at Visa. Visa brings you this show every week. They want to let you know that it's safe, it's secure. Shopping with Visa is an experience that gives you calm, peace of mind, a zen-like state, mind like water, because you, my friend, you don't have to worry about online fraud. See, Visa uses all these sophisticated tools to prevent, to detect, to resolve online fraud. So the next time you go shopping, the next time you get out there, the next time you are using a credit card, whip out your Visa, my friends, because it's safe, it's secure, it's Visa. We thank them so much for their support of Windows Weekly. Let's before we get to the Surface, I want to save that.
Okay.
Because that's playtime. Anything else in the Zune that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, well, as was we should get off into a side discussion of the Apple stuff too, because I think this is related. But
new Nanos came out. iPhone. I'm updating my iPhone right now.
Yeah. Did you get? So I have a new Nano, and I also have a new iPod Touch.
Oh, you just went shopping, baby.
I did. I'm not completely impressed here. I have to figure out how I'm going to review these. In fact, I think that these new devices and the new Zunes, all of which I would put air quotes around the word new for all of them,
right,
is that this market is suddenly hit maturity.
Sure.
And it's come screeching to a halt.
What I said. It's like fins on a car. They're now to the point where they're Detroit. They're doing model years. In order to get you to buy a new one, they have to make it look different, even if they can't really add features.
Yeah, I call that "look at the monkey."
Yeah,
and that's where the guy kind of waves his hands around. And he's like, "Oh, look at the monkey!
It's a new monkey."
Yeah, I mean, it's. So there we are, and I feel a little bad about that in the case of Zune because at least in Apple's case, you can say, well, they've been making these things for 7 years now. There's been a lot of experience, and
they added shake to shuffle.
By the way, that feature is ridiculous.
What's funny is what? Go ahead.
That's a demo.
It is.
That's all it is. Look, I can stand on a stage and shake. Oh, Jay, I showed my wife that, and she said, "You're joking, right?"
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be the most used feature. Plus, you have to really shake it hard. Otherwise, it wouldn't work when you run.
You have to really shake the thing. It's stupid. That's. Oh, jeez. Anyway.
Well, it's funny. It's not even the first MP3 player I've seen with that. There's a kid's MP3 player that does it.
Excellent. Great. Okay.
They didn't even invent it.
This is just dumb. I'm sorry. So, on the Zune side, it's even worse in a way because they have new colors, Obviously they bumped up the storage. I mean, that's very easy to do. But, all of the advances in both the Zune and the iPod this year really are on sort of the software side.
Yeah.
Right.
And not even that much there because really, as you say, we kind of know the feature set now.
Well, apparently, iTunes, which of course released in such a buggy version earlier in the week that everyone was blue screening on Vista.
Oh, boy.
They've since fixed that.
Oh, that's good.
But there were 3 or 4 days there where everyone who installed iTunes 8 and plugged in an iPhone got a blue screen of death. Good stuff. Thank you, Apple, for that. And by the way, no irony at all with those ads you have on TV about reliability and so forth. But anyway, it's funny to me that iTunes, the software, has become more and more like Windows Media Player every release.
Oh, that's interesting.
And well, one of the things they're talking about this time is this sort of album art view where it's in a grid, which is the way Windows Media Player has looked forever. So they've moved further and further from the way it was to this sort of, Anyway, the Zune stuff. I actually have to say, the software is excellent, and even if you don't have a Windows like a device of any kind, and you just want to manage music, especially because it's really, really geared toward music. It does video and it does other things, but really the music experience is awesome on Zune. They have some cool visualizations like now playing views and ways to discover music and sort of active and passive ways to get into their social network stuff, which is the way you discover new music, either via friends or via experts or via the music industry or just via other people who are on the service, sort of like what Apple's doing with the Genius, but I think a little more elaborate. The Zune software stuff is cool. So that new version will be coming out. I think it's on Tuesday. And that's really interesting to me.
Apple didn't do the subscription store, which everybody rumored that they would. And I think that's really another place Zune has a real advantage.
It does. But I would say, again, $15 a month is too expensive.
Yeah, it should be 10.
And
I agree.
It should be 10. And then we're talking. I think if Apple did it, they would get it right. But I also should say, the music industry doesn't really like Apple right now.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do it. Yeah,
I think that's why.
Yeah.
I think if Apple had the relationship with the music industry that it does with the TV and movie industry, we would have subscription service via iTunes right now.
So it's the record companies that are keeping them from doing that.
Well, yeah, they don't have they can't do the content.
Right.
And by the way, I think it's also notable that since Apple announced, we're going to try to go DM free, they haven't expanded that at all.
Only one label, yeah.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Amazon, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone else has it from everybody, basically. So,
No, they're trying to, no, they're definitely trying to strangle iTunes. It's too powerful.
Yeah, it is. Well, it certainly does dominate the industry. I mean, from a basics standpoint, if you this is probably applies to 90% of the market. If you're just there, you want to listen to music, occasional TV show, that kind of thing. The Zune works great. It's when you get off into these sort of esoteric niche, usage scenarios where the iPod and iTunes just do everything. But then, it also shows in the interface, right? I mean, this thing like the iPod itself started off very simple. And now there's like buttons everywhere. It's got very complex, but that's what happens. Again, it's on the iPod side, you see the maturity through this sort of evolution over revolution thing. And then on the software side, unfortunately, as you add features, I mean, that's a necessary side effect. It just gets more complicated.
Right.
So I guess if you care about the simplicity stuff, the Zune, because they started over with the software a year ago, it's simpler. Doesn't do as much, but what it does do, it does really well. And that's the description that I think we might have applied to Apple years ago, right? Yep. It may not do everything, but but what it does do, it does really well. And that's where the Zune's at right now. The other thing is, and they wouldn't say this explicitly, but I caught this from a number of people. It seems like the Zune, obviously it's not been very successful from a market share perspective. It's still number 3 in the market. Which is shocking, in some ways. 3%, I think, of the market.
Yeah, number 3, by the way. It's way down there.
It's number 3 with a bullet, but the bullet, unfortunately, is in its forehead,
Yeah.
There are sort of hints of how the Zune platform is going to expand out in interesting ways. And again, no one said this explicitly, but I got the sort of vibe that they meant, say, Windows mobile phones, which is a rumor these days. But
that would be a very cool thing, I think.
Yeah, and not just Windows mobile phones, but maybe also phones from, say, other people. And again, no one said any.
Of course, remember Apple tried that, and it was a famous flop.
Yes. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Doesn't mean it would be a flop if Microsoft did it. But just...
Well, I don't know, a flop, but I think that what these other companies are interested in is maybe Apple not being so dominant, and maybe they'd be willing to help make that happen, that kind of thing. And I also sort of got the vibe that Zune would be this platform that expanded beyond devices, and that this year's emphasis on software was not by chance. And that maybe they're de-emphasizing that stuff, and that maybe the future of this is not necessarily Zune devices, but other devices and software elsewhere, that kind of thing. And we'll see what that means. But I do know that Windows 7, for example, will not use Zune as the media player. They're working on a new version of Windows Media Player.
See, that baffles me.
That baffles a lot of people.
I just, get behind it.
Yeah. So if anyone is listening from the Windows 7 team, I would advise you right now to give up on Windows Media Player.
Just pick one. I don't care which one. I mean, Zune Store would be my preference, but pick one.
Because eventually what's going to happen is there will be this meeting, whether it's internal or with external people, where somebody raises their hand and says, I don't understand what you're doing with music. You've got this thing over here. You've got this thing over here. You've got 3 different stores. You got different stuff on the Xbox. You get this over. When are you going to do it? And then eventually someone's going to say, yeah, you're right. Let's consolidate this.
It's going to happen.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it now.
Yeah.
Just do it now.
Yeah.
This is stupid. It's stupid.
Maybe there's some sort of a Darwinian thing going on, and they want to see which one survives. That would be an interesting strategy,
Listen, they're both not gonna survive if they don't do something.
Point.
So
good point.
Put your eggs in one basket and run with it.
Pick something. Somebody in the chat room said, "Hey, I like Zune because I'm not a slave to Steve Jobs' empire." But on the other hand, so you're a slave to Steel Ballmer's empire.
By the way, on the flip side, I'm paraphrasing, but this is exactly what the guy said. I wrote an article about the problems Apple's been having lately. More recently with the blue screen of death stuff in iTunes, the mobile me junk, the iPhone. I mean, this is now the third software release in a row where they've, seriously, this time we're going to fix the problems. They're having some problems. And someone wrote me and said, stop being so cranky. I'd rather have buggy, crashing junk from Apple than anything from Microsoft.
Well, there you go. That says it all, doesn't
it? Okay.
It's a preference.
We all have opinions.
It's a personal preference.
Yikes.
Yeah. I think that's when you start talking. You're talking politics now, not technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's new Microsoft hardware for 2008. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and this is something I haven't historically covered closely, but I think I'm going to start doing it because, Microsoft actually has some really cool hardware, and in fact, I have one of these Blue Track mice. It's a wireless mouse that uses a different kind of laser. So it's not an optical mouse. It's not a red laser. It has sort of a blue light, but it tracks across many different surfaces.
That's my big problem with laser mice is how few surfaces they work on.
Yeah, you get up on a counter, especially that happens here.
Anything reflective, yeah.
Yeah, the mouse just goes spastic. It's unusable. So this thing works on shag carpets.
That's what I need. Finally, a mouse that works on shag carpets.
Well, the funny thing is, okay, so there you go. You get this. I'm not really big into wireless mice and keyboards, but actually, I have to say, I like the feel of this mouse a lot. It's big. Using a split ergonomic keyboard and a larger mouse has really completely alleviated whatever carpal tunnel stuff I started to get a long time ago. In fact, so much so that it's no longer an issue. And this mouse, if anything, is even bigger and I would say, I don't want to say correctly shaped, but correctly shaped for my hands than the mouse I've been using. So actually, I think it's cool. The other thing is they have designer mice and, designer keyboards and all that stuff, but they've got some webcam stuff coming out this year that's really kind of awesome. I don't know if you saw I got some pictures up on the site of this teeny little webcam. Not a webcam.
You could call it a webcam.
It's more of a cam than a clam, but it's a little thing, and it clips onto your laptop, onto your screen. It can clip anywhere. It comes with a little 11-inch pole that you can clip it to the top of, so you can position that thing anywhere in your desk. But it also has these little magnetic discs that you can stick onto your laptop or onto your display, and it will actually just latch onto that disc using a magnet. And they're really, really nice. I mean, I got to get my hands on one of those things. We kind of saw them. They had a hardware event for international press that I went to because I happened to be on campus, and we visited that. But yeah, some cool stuff. And
I'm looking at the pictures. This Sidewinder mouse, the X8.
Yeah.
How many buttons does that have?
By the way, not just buttons. The Sidewinder mice, they have they're like fishing lure. What do you call those things? Like the weights you put on like a fishing line.
Yeah.
They basically have these little weight discs.
Yeah.
And you can slide them into the side. So for you, it has the perfect balance,
right.
And weight and feel and so forth.
Right.
I mean, they're crazy.
Funny.
Yeah.
That is a hoot.
They have something for everybody.
Yes, they do. I like the Arc. That's very pretty. See, I can't use the Explorer because I'm a lefty, unless they have a left-handed version.
No, and that's the classic question with these guys. They do make ambidextrous mouses, but they tend to be the lower end ones.
Yeah.
And this comes up a lot. And while I may feel personally that lefties should I don't know, be breeded out of society.
Hey.
Just kidding. But no, this is a question that comes up, and they just don't. They're not interested. I think the deal is, how do you sell that thing?
Yeah.
You've got, so let's, I don't know, what is 20, 30, 40% of people are left-handed, whatever it may be.
No, it's not.
They would
that
have
many,
to
but still.
Okay. Well, they'd have to ship some weird small percentage. They'd have to be very clearly labeled. You can only imagine the huge number of returns they would get on these things. And how do you go to Best Buy and say, okay, we'd like you to stock one of these for every 5 of the right-handed ones. Yeah. And you figure out how to display the boxes. It's like, whoa, what?
Yeah, so you're right. But that's why I like agnostic mice.
I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying that's their argument.
Well, you're a righty. Typical righty bias. Typical.
Jeez. There's something about left-handed people that I think is evil.
We're not in our right minds.
Isn't this in the Bible or something?
It is, I believe. It is, I believe, in the Bible. Yeah, I'm the spawn of Satan.
My wife is also a left-handed person, by the way.
I knew there was some reason for all this.
Some reason I knew so much about it.
No, but I look at these mice. There's some great mice from Logitech too, and it makes me sad.
Yes.
They leave me out. This Explorer, the new one, looks really cool. Love it. I would buy it.
Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, I use a Microsoft mouse, but it's a symmetric one. It's agnostic, I guess. It's the same on the left and the right.
Last redesigned in 1997. It's really
it's a classic. It still works. You're right. Since the scroll wheel
doesn't have a little ball under the bottom.
Yeah, practically. Yeah, practically.
That's too bad.
Let's see what else is new. Windows Live Wave 3. Stand back for the fun.
Where did you get that from?
I made that up.
Made that up.
That's my new slogan. Couldn't be any worse than a churro ad that's signed. We're going to talk about that too. There's the second edition, which now apparently is a Dijon mustard ad.
Wow.
You like it?
I do like it, and this is where the Mac Windows things comes out most in your.
No, it's not about Mac and Windows. It's a stupid ad. And okay, I'll tell you what I didn't like about this ad. Now, I watched the long version. I haven't seen the cut down. I don't know what the cut down looks like.
No one has. I don't.
Yeah, but the long version, which is long, 3 minutes long. Anyway, it's clear now that the whole plan is to make a sitcom.
Yes.
But really, all I got at it was that Jerry and Bill are so rich that they don't know how normal people live.
Right.
I mean, there's comedy in it. I laughed.
Yes.
But
no, but don't you get the feeling from the second one that it is actually going somewhere? With the first one, there was a sort of a
I got that. I could tell from the first one they were doing a sitcom. But my question really is in what way does this help Microsoft? It does help Bill Gates. It makes Bill, and it's what you were saying all along, which is that they should have these great the great humorous stuff that they do for this keynotes. It'd be great to see those, and that's essentially what this is.
It is the kind of it is I would say a nice combination of the sort of story about nothing that was a big Seinfeld hallmark
10 years ago.
Okay, fair enough. But also the type of humor that Microsoft has in these internal videos.
I think seeing Bill Gates and Jerry Seinfeld sand a door is very funny. There was something very funny about that.
I thought so too. I thought that was great.
Yeah. But what does it sell again? Tell me again.
Oh, hold on a second. We've only seen 2 of these things. It's not selling anything yet. That's the point.
We're so rich, we don't have to make ads that sell anything.
Wow.
Wow. We can afford to spend $300 million on ads that don't pitch anything.
Okay, so let's apply this logic to the Apple ads. We're so arrogant, we don't have to make ads that sell our products. We can make ads that make fun of another product, even while we're crashing that product with our own poor products. I mean,
you have to understand that. Apple, when you're in a marketplace where you only have 10% market share, of course, you're going to have to say this is why you should consider using our product. They can't ignore Windows. But Microsoft's not only ignoring Macintosh; it's ignoring Windows. It's ignoring everything. It has nothing to do with anything.
No. Hold on. They're not done. See, that's the problem
here.
They're
not done.
They're not done. But they've said all along, this is a long series of ads. It's going to run over a long period of time. And they've been very upfront about the fact that in the beginning, we're not going to sell you anything. We're just introducing this series, and we'll get there. And I think in the second part, you get this notion that it's getting a little more concrete, that they're going to start, pushing. But right now, it's about establishing what's going on.
By the way, you're getting a lot of support in the chat room. People are saying I'm an Apple fanboy for not liking this stupid ad. It has nothing to do with Apple. I'm not. You're the one mentioning Apple. I'm not mentioning Apple in the least.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with Apple. It doesn't. If Xerox did this ad, I'd have the same thing. It's like, what's the point? You're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and you're not in any way.
This has everything to do with Apple, and I will explain why.
Okay.
This is not AT&T. This is not Xerox. This is not Crest toothpaste. This is a company that makes a product that has been defined by another company for months and months and months and months in a very derogatory fashion. And they've, what it's created is this sense that, Vista's a failure. Microsoft is this enormous company that is made up of drones that don't care about you or, aren't human beings. And
I don't think having Bill Gates and Jerry Seinfeld show how out of touch they are with real people is succeeding in any way to do that.
Well, but that's the spokesperson, and that's the guy that is sort of the face of Microsoft, even though he's not even a full-time employee anymore.
Right.
And what this is
I
really
think it's
doing
a good ad for Bill Gates. I'm not. I mean, if your product were Bill Gates, I'd say this is a great ad for Bill Gates.
So all I would say is, again, it's the second ad, as promised, not selling anything yet. It's $300 million worth of ads coming. Give it some time.
Most companies don't have the luxury of buying network television time by the hundreds of millions of dollars.
By the way, you're absolutely right.
And having nothing in the ad.
Right. Well, Microsoft does have that luxury, and I think what's disgusting about this the most is that they haven't done anything yet. So now they're finally doing it. It's overdue.
I think. Okay. Since you bring up Apple, I'm not. But you can bring up almost any product. But I think the Apple Switch ads accomplish thousands times more in 30 seconds than the 6 minutes total we've seen now of the Gates.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't deny that.
Again, you're missing the point. This is a company. In other words, the feeling here is Microsoft's this huge entity out there. We all kind of get PCs because we kind of have to have PCs. No one would ever choose Windows. This is about establishing, their view of what's going on in the. Well, I'm just okay. I know.
I think they could do that more effectively. Is all I'm saying. I agree they need to do that, but I look forward to the time when they start.
Oh wow!
Well, they haven't. What have they done so far?
Hold on a second.
They've sold shoes and churros.
Stop.
All right.
It's like you can't stand it. Listen, this is only part of the deal, right? In other words, there are other things going on that they're doing. The Mojave experiment is one of them. I actually got to see a Mojave experiment tent out at a Best Buy in Washington State, and I got to visit that and see what that was like. And I think the Mojave experiment stuff is very effective and more along the lines of what you're looking for, which is something that's very much like an Apple ad where you can say, look at this awesome new thing we're going to do in the future. Oh, I hate Vista and I love this. Oh, it's Vista. Ha, ha, ha. The joke's on you. And I think we all get that message very easily and very quickly. And people try to pick it apart. But that is very much like. Yeah, but actually,
I'm with you in one respect, which is I don't think that comparison marketing is what they should be doing at this point. If certainly not, that's not the issue for Microsoft. What they need to be doing is convincing people of the quality of their product and say, look at all the great things you can do with Windows.
Again, I think this is only, like I said, it's only part of it. The other thing they're doing is they're doing this guru thing in Best Buy locations where they're setting up, one might say, Apple-like store within a store type things, where they have people that are knowledgeable about their products that go in there and they talk to people.
That's smart.
I think that's smart.
Now we'll see how much they actually do. What would be not smart is if it's some guy trying to sell me Windows. what would be smart if it's somebody who's really helpful and
right.
Yeah.
The other thing they're doing, and this is long overdue, I'd say, Microsoft, unlike Apple, in many ways, and by the way, maybe like Google, which could explain Chrome in some ways, does not control its own destiny. In other words, they make this thing, but you get it on a product made by someone else who has different priorities, and they fill it full of crapware and junkware and their own utilities, and they kind of ruin the experience. So by the time, someone gets Vista or any version of Windows, their experience with this system is colored by the fact that, maybe they bought it from HP or Dell or Sony or whoever it is, and maybe that company put a bunch of junk on there. Whereas, when you buy an Apple product, you're buying, you get Apple. And they have a couple little things on a Mac, obviously, but nothing in your face. And, one of the dark side to the openness of Windows is that anyone gets to do anything they want to it. By the time the consumer sees it, it could be 20 minutes before the thing boots up because it's got all this problem. So they're working with PC makers to get rid of that kind of thing, and to also make sure that these things are shipping with the latest drivers and the right things. And they've seen enormous results. There's a program called Vista Velocity, which is an internal program at Microsoft to work with companies. And I think as of next week, 100% of Sony laptops, if I'm not mistaken, shipping will have gone through this Vista Velocity program. And they're seeing things like, boot time is, 40% of what it was originally, that kind of thing. And all it is, they're not, it's not like Microsoft's going in and tweaking things we don't know about. They're literally saying, here's the latest driver. Yeah. Just put it on there. Yeah. And it works. And that's all it takes. And all of these things and more, this is what I can remember off the top of my head. I'm not looking at notes or anything. The Microsoft Seinfeld ads, the Mojave experiment stuff, Vista Velocity, the Gurus, all of these things, and probably some other things I can't remember. It's all part of this effort, just to make sure that, what people are seeing isn't what Apple says Vista is. It's Vista. That's it. Simple. So yeah, you can look at an individual Seinfeld and be like, they're not selling anything. It's a joke about alcohol and mustard. What is this? It's not. You can't look at it like that. It's part of it's just part of something bigger. And by the way, hey, look, at the very least, at least the second one is, you can complain about the first ad, but at least the second one's just funny. It's just funny.
There's humor.
It is legitimately funny. Yes. Yeah. It's funny.
There's humor. So I wasn't laughing out loud, but it was funny.
Okay, we'll get you there.
I can't think of another case where there's been a major ad campaign like this, and
of course. But can you think of another case where, let's say Burger King advertised about how McDonald's hamburgers have cockroaches in them for 2 years,
right?
And no one from McDonald's ever replied, ever. There was no reply ever,
right?
Can you think of a time?
That's a bad situation, yeah. But I mean, that doesn't redound to Microsoft's credit.
Absolutely. Listen, no, I have said this many times. It is Microsoft's fault. Absolutely.
And so you're saying this is the antidote?
No, I'm saying this is part of their response.
Right.
It's a big response. I can't believe it took them so long. I don't know why it took so long to do it.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff that goes on here, by the way. I mean, you can look at all kinds of different things. When Vista first came out in the market, right? Almost 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago. What was the message that they had for businesses? It was nothing.
Right. They've had trouble from day one. I agree.
Well, I mean, there was nothing to say. In other words,
right.
Why do I want to upgrade from XP? Oh, we have BitLocker,
Arrow.
Great. Well, 2 years later, that picture is actually dramatically different.
Yes.
They've got the optimized desktop.
Right.
They've got this app virtualization stuff, which is incredible. They're going to have Cadero running on there soon, which is a way to stream or run virtualized applications individually instead of within a virtualized environment. For businesses, the picture for Vista has only gotten better over time. And now, for the first time, I would say, Microsoft can, with any sense of honesty, stand up in front of an audience and say, we have something that does have concrete value, and we could prove that it's better, which is something they couldn't say, when it first launched. And on the consumer end, I would say it's kind of a similar story, but for different reasons. Now you can't really claim anymore that things don't work. In fact, one of the beautiful things that's happened over the past 3, 4, 5, 6 months is suddenly 64-bit PCs running 64-bit versions of Windows with 4 gigs of RAM are just the way it is.
Right.
And people buy these things. They have no idea it's 64-bit. They download applications and utilities and whatever on the web, and they work fine. Their devices plug in and they all work. It's a completely different world. So maybe this is the right time.
So the ad campaign maybe should be Windows. It works now. I mean,
I'm not talking.
I think the real issue,
Yeah, okay.
frankly, is that operating systems are so mature that they're practically commoditized, and that's when you do get to the point where you're sniping at each other because there's not that much difference.
Actually, that's fair enough, right? We talked about the maturity in the MP3 player market.
It's very similar.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Listen, when Leopard came out, and again, no one listened to this even remembers it, but I mean, had lots of problems. You don't hear about them as much because the whole world doesn't use it. There are a billion people using Windows. It's a big deal.
You'd have a lot more. I agree with you. You'd hear a lot more if you had, and that's why people hear a lot more about iTunes problems on Windows. Frankly,
absolutely, of course. That's why this iPhone stuff is such a big deal.
That's right.
I've written about this. People who are fond of Apple are very forgiving of problems, and because they know the company will fix them over time, and that's fine when you're working within whatever little audience you have. But when it reaches into that outside world, when it affects millions of people, that's when it's a problem. And that's why I think Apple's growing pains this year with their products running on Windows, Mobile Me, the iPhone, iTunes 8. That's what that is.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good point.
You hit a certain scale, welcome to the real world.
Right. Hey, let's talk about that great Microsoft Surface. How about that, huh? You got to play with one. I'm sorry. I should wait till you're done drinking before I...
That's okay. One thing I haven't posted, I was with a couple of people from Wagner Edstrom, which is one of Microsoft's PR companies.
Yes.
And I took pictures of the table while they were kind of futzing around with it. We you can resize photos, you can do all this stuff. But one of the girls played on the piano because it's a virtual piano.
Oh, that's neat.
So I'm going to post a video of this.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's really neat. But it's you can play the keys and it plays. You can run your finger across the keys and it does that. I don't know. I'm not a musician, but it plays that trill as you go across.
Oh wow!
Yeah, neat. I mean, the version I saw, it was kind of the demo machine, the demo apps. Wasn't in a hotel or a casino where they would have applications specific to that environment, but showing off some of the possibilities. And okay, whatever. That's
who it's for. I mean, it's no human's going to spend $10,000 on a desktop.
No, I think the way this will work is the way a lot of kind of home technologies work is where in the beginning they're expensive and they're the province of these custom builders. Like when you used to get a home theater and it was really $10,000 and you'd have this room with movie theater seats, or now you can go to Best Buy and spend $200 and put it in your den, and you can see the speakers, but it sounds incredible and it looks great, and you can do that kind of thing. So I think that the Surface eventually, or something like Surface, will be the walls we have in our homes where instead of paintings or pictures, we have imagery that looks like that and changes on a regular basis. You can walk up and touch it and interact with it. There'll be tables and other surfaces that have this computing environment, built into them, and it will just become part of the deal. You could almost imagine a table where you put a drink down, and if it senses it's a cold drink, and so it actually chills that part of the table, or it senses it's a hot drink and it
That's
heats
pretty
that
cool.
part.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
It's semi-obvious. It's semi-Minority Report stuff.
Yeah, it's smart furniture. Yeah. It's the same thing as putting two items on the counter and them telling.
I just want my, at this point, I'd like my DVD player to work. I'm not ready for Microsoft Surface.
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal where I live. If you have an automatic vehicle, a vehicle with an automatic transmission, you can get like a remote car starter. So when it's snowing outside, you can, from the comfort of your home, you can flip the thing and the car comes on. To me, a little bit more of a pressing need than the smart table, but I guess we'll get there as our comfort level goes up and up. I don't know. But,
let's take a break. Coming up, your tips and a software pick as well. But first, it's time to talk about zombies. Zombies. Yes. This show, as usual, brought to you by the good folks at Audible.com, a world of online reading, 50,000 plus titles. My book is finally up there, by the way, the little one I read when I was out there. It's for kids. The story of Little Golden Riding Hood. Free, it's a giveaway. But
that's neat.
Yeah, but you have something a little bit more interesting to recommend for us this week. By the way, before you recommend, I just want to mention you can get a book free, including Paul's pick of the week, by going to audible.com/windows. If you're not already an Audible member, just sign up. You'll get a credit toward a free book. And that book is yours to keep. even if you decide not to stick around, although I know you will. And what is it with zombies? Why?
I might have told the story before, and if I did, I apologize. But I have a friend that I stay with out in Seattle, and we're big zombie fans, and as are some of his other friends out there. So
when did that start? Did it start with Night of the Living Dead, or? Yeah,
it's a long-term deal. Bad horror movies, and I don't know.
But now it's kind of comedy, with the.
It is kind of comedy.
Dead Rising, the game, and then
which, by the way, his favorite game, and they have the Zombie Survival Guide, which is classic if you haven't seen that, and there's a great website, where you sort of treat something like a zombie uprising as if it were in fact not just a historical fact but a scientific probability, and the notion that there'll be like a blog where every day they update it, and one day it says something like, you may have learned from zombie movies that it's you should use a shotgun blast to the head when you're trying to kill a zombie. In fact, this is very ineffective. Here's why. And it goes on for like 3,000 words. It's just crazy. It's like an actual like logical breakdown of why this is not in fact a good defense against zombies. And here's what you should really do. And it's like, who are these people?
Bizarre.
Yeah, it's great. So anyway, even on this trip, I stayed with this guy again, and I think we watched at least three different zombie movies while I was there, which is crazy. But anyway, it's a fixation. So he recommended a book to me, and it's which I grabbed. It's awesome. It's called World War Z.
Yeah,
an oral history of the zombie war.
Oh yeah,
and it's set up as a series of interviews with the people who were sort of key players in something that
after the war,
after the fact. So in this book's timeline, World War III has occurred, and it's been the zombie war. And they talk to different people from all around the world. So you get an idea of how this thing started, where it started, how it moved from country to country, and all that kind of stuff.
Is there any chance that there could be a zombie war? I'm just worried a little bit now.
I think so, yeah. Oh, so the story, which I might have told you, was a couple of years ago, I went out there and we went out. We saw the new, at the time, the George Romero movie. I think it was called Land of the Dead, and we went out to dinner. It was me and my friend Joe and his other friend, another friend of his is into zombies. And this guy, this is so crazy. He says, "Well, we were talking about what would you do? So the zombies rise again, and what would you do?" And so we discussed the various things you would do against the zombies and how to survive in such a thing. And then he said, "Well, what about robots?" He says, what if the robots rise?
Yeah.
And they try to take over the world? So we talked about that for a while. And then he said, he goes, what would happen if the zombies and the robots rise at exactly the same time? And I said, listen to me. I said, you sometimes you can overthink this stuff.
Yeah, you can overthink it, yeah.
I said, if that happens, we're just going to have to wing it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, really
I
funny.
think there's something going on. It's the psychology of the zombie thing. It's something.
I think it. Anyway, this book's fantastic. It's not a comedy at all. It's
serious.
Yeah, and and by the way, the audiobook version is excellent.
Well, look who's reading it. I mean, this is like
Alan Alda's in it. The author's in it. John Turturro, Rob Reiner. And again, it's done as a series of interviews. That's good stuff.
So really, it's comedy, but it's dry comedy. It's so tongue in cheek that
no, it's not. It's not comedy at all. In fact, it's done as if this happened, and here's the history. It's just like World War II's over, and now let's talk to the
right.
It's like what Ken Burns would do. Let's go back and talk.
I'm adding this to my list. This sounds really
good stuff.
Really interesting. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, not unabridged. They really need an unabridged version.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I had looked at the paper version of the book, and I was thinking to myself, because he had it in his house, and I was like, well, how are they going to do this as an audiobook?
It's too much. Yeah, that's
just too much. So I think they broke down the best stories and
acted it out. Very cool.
Yeah.
Get it for free by going to audible.com/Windows. We thank Audible so much for their support of Windows Weekly. I love the kind of variety you can get on Audible. It's so cool. This saves you on your commute, I can tell you. So let's get to Paul's picks. I got a radio show to do here in a few minutes.
Yep.
Starting with your tip of the week.
We can bang these out. I have two.
Bang them out.
I guess I have one tip of the week, and I have two software picks of the week. So the tip is about data synchronization, and we've talked about Live Mesh a lot. We've talked about SyncToy, and we've recommended both of them. But there's this other thing that Microsoft makes called Folder Share. Now, Folder Share sits under the Windows Live umbrella. So to find it, you go to foldershare.live.com, and anyone with a live ID can log on, download the software, and use this thing. So what is it? And how does it compare to these other things? FolderShare is peer-to-peer data sync. You set up folders that will be shared across 2 or more PCs, and it works just like Live Mesh. You change the data on one, it goes to the other computer, and it keeps everything up to date. So it's a lot like Live Mesh, with the big difference being from a usability standpoint, that there's no web desktop. So that's the thing that Live Mesh adds from a functional perspective. In addition to your PCs, where you're sharing folders, I have things like, I have a folder called Articles I'm working on now. I also have a folder called Docs, which is like my core documents. And I have a couple of picture-related folders like Favorites, that has pictures from trips and from the home and family events and all that kind of stuff. And I can sync these things from PC to PC around the world. So I could be in Seattle with a laptop, and with either Live Mesh or FolderShare, those changes would occur over the internet from PC to PC, as long as they're on, right? They have to be powered on, obviously, and online. Live Mesh is not strictly peer-to-peer, although you can set it up to be peer-to-peer. So the big difference is FolderShare is peer-to-peer. Goes from PC to PC to PC, and that's it. Nothing is ever saved up on in a web desktop. There is no web desktop. The other big difference is there's one side capability that they both offer. FolderShare offers the ability, and it's optional. You have to actually opt into this and enable it. But if you do, and a PC is on, you can actually navigate the PC's folder structure from the web and download from that PC to your current PC. And what's really interesting about that is it's not just your shared folders. Once you enable this feature, you actually see the whole hard drive of that other PC. So you could go and download other things from that PC, even over the internet. And that itself is actually pretty useful. Live Mesh offers, in some ways, slightly more compelling functionality. It's a full remote desktop. So you get this window pops up. It gives you your whole PC environment of that other computer, wherever it may be, right? So you can navigate the start menu. You can see graphically the desktop and all that stuff. So those are the two big live services, that Microsoft offers. And the differences between the two from an architectural standpoint, Microsoft doesn't really discuss what is underneath FolderShare. But what they told me was that Live Mesh is really a platform. And these features that I've just discussed that are in Live Mesh, remote desktop and the folder sharing feature, are really kind of proof of concepts saying this platform we're building does in fact work. And what Microsoft told me was that FolderShare in many ways is actually the future of this, because what they're going to do with FolderShare is eventually build FolderShare on top of the Live Mesh platform. So once that thing hits a certain point, they're actually going to move FolderShare over to the Live Mesh platform. So I guess if you're looking ahead and you want something that, we discussed earlier in the podcast, Live Mesh is sort of a tech preview. If there isn't something specific you want in Live Mesh, that isn't available in FolderShare in some ways may be the way to go, because it's the more I guess less beta of a platform. It's still in beta, but it's maybe further along, I guess I would say, more mature from a usability standpoint. They both work pretty well, though, in my experience. Although, again, Live Mesh did have that weird problem, and they fixed it pretty quickly. But I had some big issues with Live Mesh for a couple of weeks there. Now, there's a third synchronization tool called SyncToy. And SyncToy is more for your PC to PC data sync on your home network. So in other words, these computers aren't necessarily going anywhere. I mean, they can, but if you have a music collection, a photo collection, or just documents or whatever it is, and you want to synchronize them manually or on a schedule, not automatically, but on a schedule, SyncToy is the way to go. And I actually use that at home all the time on my desktop PC. So my main PC, I have my music collection, my photos, and some other things. And I have it set up so that overnight, every night, it runs this thing and it pushes them out to different places on my home network. So I always have multiple copies of things that are important to me. So if I acquire photos from a digital camera on my desktop PC, which is the way I do that, overnight, those things will be backed up to the different locations where they have to go. So as far as choosing which one to use, it's kind of a toss-up, I guess, when it comes to FolderShare or Live Mesh. I think you should look at both of them and determine which one makes more sense for you. Definitely check them both out. I mean, they're both very similar but slightly different. I think I'm going to stick with FolderShare for a little while. I want to kind of play with it and see what the limitations are. And then, of course, with Live Mesh being the bigger platform, I think everything's going to be pushed over to live mesh. But if you don't travel a lot, or you're looking for something that's basically a backup type product, SyncToy, I think, would be the way to go. But a combination of SyncToy and one of these other things would work great too for just about anybody. And by the way, these things are all completely free too, which is really cool.
Very cool. So it's kind of midway between file sharing and a live mesh desktop.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, you can get really crazy with this stuff. If you wanted to do file sharing, obviously, Microsoft has SkyDrive, which allows you to share files with other people up to 5 gigabytes on of storage, totally, on a live web service where, you can literally click on a URL to download a file, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. It's interesting how the Windows Live platform, and I guess what will become the live mesh platform underneath all of this, is evolving over time. So yeah, this specifically, I guess, PC to PC data sync, these are the 3 big tools that Microsoft has. They're all excellent, actually. I mean, and like I said, they're all free. So as a Windows user, you should definitely be aware of them and check them out and think about the different ways they can be used, because they're all slightly different. Folder share, live mesh, very similar. SyncToy solves a completely different problem.
Yeah. Cool. And your, that was kind of a download, wasn't it? But it's also a tip. How about your download of the week?
So there are 2. Software picker. One's a download, one's actually an online service.
Right.
So we were talking about ClearType and how it's really not possible or easy to tweak ClearType on Windows Vista. And Michael Daniels, who listens to the podcast, wrote in and said, Microsoft actually does make a power toy for Windows XP called the ClearType tuning control panel applet.
Yeah, and I was kind of saying, where is that in Vista?
It's not in Vista, but as it turns out, you can download this thing from Microsoft, run it in Vista. It gives you a little, burp, this doesn't work in Vista. What are you doing? But it does work in Vista. In fact, you can go through the little wizard and tweak ClearType, and when you're done, it will work the way you want it to work. So if you want to make some changes to the way ClearType works in Vista, that's something to check out. And the way you find that is to go to Microsoft.com/typography.
Okay.
And then cleartypepowertoy.mspx.
Okay.
And I'll put that
now,
up.
it's for XP, what you say, but it'll do the same thing in Vista? Because that's what I was unclear about. I got the impression, it's on in Vista and you don't need to tune it or something like that. But
it is on, but people might always listen. I talked about this monitor I have, and I don't want to say it's not blurry, but it's a little off, and it's the type of thing where text could be a little clearer. So I was just playing with that before we started recording, actually.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it on right now because, in fact, I know some people who say, I don't like clear text ClearType because it's smeary. And and on XP, of course, you can choose how much anti-aliasing you want, and that solves that problem completely. So
Vista, it's on or it's off, and there's nothing in the UI that I've seen, that helps you adjust that. So this is one way to do that. The other thing is I was looking for a tool to download and convert FLV files, these Flash video files, which are all over the web now, thanks to YouTube and other video services. And there are different ways you can download FLV files with Real Player, the new version of Real Player, but then they stay in FLV format, and you can play them with Real Player, but not to be a jerk about it, but who wants to use Real Player? So there's actually an online service, and they make a downloadable software version of this as well, but I think the online service works just as good. I don't see any reason to download it. It's called Vixy.net, Vixy.net, and basically you just paste in the URL of a page on YouTube, and it will convert that video to MPEG-4 to DivX to
I've used it. It really is cool.
It works great, yeah. So it's a nice way to, again, the YouTube stuff is it's 320 by 240, whatever, but if you want to watch something on the go or just, keep a copy of something you think is good. I used it to download Google's, I guess it was a press conference or a press intro they had for the Chrome browser. So I converted it to MPEG-4 using this tool, and then I loaded it on the Zune, and I watched it on the plane.
Very cool.
It's nice. Yeah.
All right. A couple of 3 or 4 good recommendations there. We'll put them all in the show notes so you can follow them all. Vixy.net, Vixy.net. Is that FLV converter. Paul Thurrott is the host, the major domo, the guy in charge of the super site for Windows, winsupersite.com. You could check it out online. Lots of good stuff there, including those good pictures of the neat new Microsoft hardware, and soon, I hope, video of piano playing on the Surface.
Yes. I'll get that up this weekend.
Fun. And, of course, the news editor for Windows IT Pro, his book, any day now, right, Paul?
I am told early October.
Windows Vista Secrets.
And here's a horror show for you. They asked me, so we're going to sign something for the Windows 7 version soon, right?
No.
It's like, what is it? It's like...
back to work. Back to the mines.
Are you kidding me?
You just finished. As long as Microsoft's working, you have to keep working. That's the rule. Oh. Maybe you could do a series of reviews of the Microsoft, like deconstruct the Microsoft commercials. I think we need like a companion book.
I think
a companion book. Here's what they're talking about when they say Dijon mustard.
Speaking of which, by the way, was it John Dvorak who did that?
No, it was Brian Block formerly of Engadget, now of GT.
Oh, okay. I thought that was, I don't want to say genius, but I thought that was
funny, wasn't it? And I think people took it very seriously, and we weren't intending it seriously. I mean, come on, it's churros and shoes. But yeah, he did a good job. I think
I'm going to change my job title to Conquistador. It will say like Conquistador, Windows Super Site.
I like it. That's a winner. It's leather, All right, Paul, we'll talk to you. They run a little tight. We'll talk to you next week. And actually, you and I have to talk about a different record time for next week because I'm going to be out of town at the National Association of Broadcasters Convention. We'll figure that out. Thank you, Paul Thurrott. Have a great Windows week.
Thanks, you too.